All right, everyone. It was a weird 24 hours on the Intel front. Basically, what you got so many different stories here that it boggled the mind, and it's looking like things I think are coming together with all of these scandals sort of being interrelated. I think it relates to the Mueller probe stuff too. I wouldn't be surprised if we see movement in that pretty soon. What happened is McCabe resigned unexpectedly. Now he meets with that other dude, Ray or whatever his name is. Or whoever it was that was put in there sort of to clean house at the FBI. He meets with him and then he resigns. And that's totally coincidental. Around the same time, the CEO of the DNC resigns, the Democratic National Committee, in an email, no less, just basically, hi, I'm not showing up to work tomorrow, find somebody else for the job. That's not related. It's totally coincidental. There's nothing here. In the same 24-hour period, the House Intel Committee voted to release the FISA memo. Do we see a pattern here where all these things look related? What I think is happening, I think the FISA memo is going to be incredibly damaging to the Democratic Party in a partisan fashion. Now, here's where it gets murky because, again, we gotta separate reality and perception. Reality is that there are probably plenty of Republicans who do shifty shit with, like, NSA spying, FBI, all their ties with these bureaus. You've got to remember, the FBI ultimately is just a bureau. It's not special. The fact that it deals with stuff that's sort of like the cops, sort of like, private investigator, Magnum PI stuff. No, I would trust Magnum PI more. I mean, like the actual actor as opposed to a real private investigator with some things. The FBI is just a bureau. They are just as problematic, flawed, and capable of bias as any other. McCabe steps down because of the perception that he's systemically biased against Trump. That may or may not be true, and it doesn't even matter. It's ultimately the perception. But I find it funny that somebody that Trump sparred with originally is the one who appears to have pressured McCabe to leave. Somebody who Trump isn't even in league with. At the same time that the DNC's CEO steps down, at the same time that they have this FISA bill, then we hear that Trump was livid at some of his staff for suggesting he wouldn't be right to release the FISA memo. And I'll tell you why they're telling him that. And these are Trump confidants. These are people who are on Trump's side. Don't give me the conspiracy stuff of, these are just swamp plants to try to, control him. No, I don't believe that. They really do believe there'd be a problem. And I'll tell you why. It's exactly what happened with the Hillary Clinton stuff. Remember I said at the time, fundamentally, it wouldn't have been good for the country to indict Hillary Clinton, with the Comey case. Here you've got a case. It would have been so conspicuous to people who perceive it as an attack on Clinton that is not deserving, to people who perceived it as an undue attack, as FBI bias literally against Clinton in that case. The perception would be that it was a usurpation of the U.S. government's proper function, the election, by the Republican Party. It would have caused civil war. It could have caused extreme levels of violence. Of course, I would say that to not indict her also was problematic, and so they took the middle road. What did Comey do at the time? Oh, she broke the law. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, people, she broke the law, basically trying to keep her out of office by making that as plain as day. But we're not going to charge her with anything. We can't prove intent. It never mattered for any other case we've ever gone after, but for her, it's special. You know why it's special? Because she was a presidential candidate. That's why it was special. If this was some Senate candidate, they would have thrown her in a prison cell. She was a presidential candidate, the Me Too, the first woman president, roar, roar, hear me roar. That's why they wanted to handle her with kid gloves. Sometimes they have no choice but to use discretion. I think that Trump's staff feel, this is their perception. I don't agree with it, but their perception is that if the FISA memo is released, it is going to cause too much social alienation, that's an important term that you need to understand, among people on the left, people who are already in some cases given over to protesting and rioting at the drop of the hat. Somebody got killed by police, it's time to go burn a shop to the ground, basically. The Antifa, the social justice warriors. People who in many cases are incapable of fighting, thankfully, and they don't tend to use firearms because they don't believe in the right to own firearms generally, but they'll certainly throw a Molotov cocktail from their wheelchair. Essentially is what they do. It can still cause a lot of damage. And nobody, of course, no cop wants to have to beat up someone who's in a wheelchair, even if they are throwing Molotov cocktails. Because then somebody's going to make a propaganda cut of that happening and say, oh, this poor defenseless cripple was beaten by the cops. Look at these pigs. Ha ha, hang the pig. That's basically what they'll say. That's what Antifa would do. It's all optics. It's perception over reality. It's propaganda. The perception I think that they genuinely have is that if this is released, what it appears to show is either the FBI or Obama or something on the left lexicon, according to Trump fans, was trying to fuck him over. That's going to cause so much social alienation. Now, I would still release it. I think at this point we have a right to know what's in it. It was played up by, half of fucking Congress. They apparently see no problem with releasing it. They represent the will of the people more than the FBI does. I'm going to side with, oddly enough, Congress on that one. It should be released. I say hashtag release the memo, absolutely 100%. And there shouldn't even be any redaction. It should be released as is, totally unredacted for the public to see. Just declassify it. Trump should unilaterally decide, hey, I'm declassifying this, I'm releasing it in full, I'm washing my hands of the situation for all diplomatic reasons. But think of it this way. How will the Democrats perceive it? They think that Trump is a Russian pawn. If Trump then comes out and greenlights a memo that says, yeah, the FBI was gunning for him all along, they are systemically biased, FISA was misused to spy on Pence, or on Flynn, or on Trump himself, or it could destroy the Mueller probe. Think about it this way. Let's say Mueller gets wrapped up in misusing FISA, or it happened before him and the authorization was improper to begin with, even before maybe he formed his probe officially. Let's say that info that pertains to the FISA memo was what was used to actually grab up Manafort and Flynn or some other in the first place. Well, that casts a huge pall over the Mueller probe. His probe then is totally defanged. How does that become perceived then? It will be perceived by people who don't like Trump, who already think he's evil, bigoted, a tyrant, whatever. It will be perceived of as Trump just using propaganda, oddly enough, to try to exonerate himself of what they presume to be his various crimes. That's going to cause a lot of alienation among certain left-wing groups, among Democrats and some Republicans, like the McCainites, the rhinos, the neocons. They don't like him either. I think that at this point, the neocons like Trump less, I think, than some of the neoliberals. Hell, he'll shake hands more with Schumer at this point than he will with John McCain. Does anyone notice that fact? But I would release the memo. Absolutely. It's fair. It's honest. We have a right to know. We know that a memo exists that is in partially redacted, classified form that everyone that reads it thinks is problematic, and most people that read it think that we deserve to read it as well. I'm going to go along with that and say it's a good idea and just trust that some Republican within Congress, again, a lot of them don't even like Trump, would have said, hey, maybe we should not release this yet. Maybe we should do something else. None of them have said that, so I'm not even going to boil it down to partisan politics. At this point, Republican and Democrat don't really mean much. What you really need to look at is populist versus the neocon, neolib nexus. Or I should say populist or libertarian or nationalistic or progressivist as opposed to the establishment. That's your real dichotomy. It's not even a dichotomy. There are all sorts of prongs and choices on both sides, all sorts of different groups. But when the DNC's CEO resigns, doesn't really give an explanation, just, hey, I'm leaving. And McCabe is forced out, and this vote is taking place. I think that probably these things are connected, honestly. I think that these things are connected. I don't think that this number of things that appear to be related, because they all relate to sort of the same agency and the sort of same political maneuvering that's going on at the moment. I don't think that it's coincidence when 3 or 4 things stack up in the same 24-hour period. I think that would bend the reasonable assumption of occasional coincidence within statistical models a little bit far for my liking. But all this stuff happens, and generally the Mueller probe is discredited. And then, in the wake of all this happening over the last 24 hours, what happens this morning? Oh, Trump isn't sanctioning Russia more. Shame on him. He's a Russian pawn. Why do you think that same line is used over and over? Look, this FISA memo may disprove once and for all that Trump's even a Russian pawn. It may totally disprove it. Maybe it mentions Russian collusion, says, yeah, there was no collusion. It was misused in some case to spy on him. Maybe it mentions fusion GPS. That was a big one. A lot of people they ignored it at the time. Remember, when we had 5 or 6 different left-wing scandals going on during the late election period at the same time, fusion GPS was the one that was mentioned the least. And I told people, keep your eyes on it. This is going to be the big one. Lo and behold, the Fusion GPS Pissgate dossier in various forms was apparently misused by the Democratic Party and the Clinton campaign themselves in order to spy on their opponents. I would say that's way, way bigger than anything else. The servers, yeah, Hillary's not going to face any time for it. I said it at the time, and a lot of people are like, no, she's going to jail this time. They're saying the same thing about Pissgate and about FISA. She's not going to go to prison. They're not going to throw Hillary Clinton in prison. They're not crazy. What do you think would happen if they did? The Democrats would cry foul and say, our government is being usurped by Russians. We must defend democracy. It would probably cause a fucking civil war. Don't think that it's beyond their capability to try to marshal the troops to protest. They'll try to cast it as a Malcolm X moment, say, we want to be peaceful, but we can't allow our republic to be sold to Moscow. And that'll work for a lot of their brain-dead fans. You know, the FBI knows this. That's why they're trying to hold back. They're like, please don't release the FISA memo. Trump staff are like, please don't release the FISA memo. The Republicans in Congress are like, oh, this will be great for the midterms. Look, we can last till the midterms, crush the Democrats out. We won't have this problem again. Then we'll have the power to clean up the FBI permanently. Or at least, until the next big scandal that'll involve Republicans. Trust me. It'll happen because of the way partisan politics work. The RNC is no different than the DNC. They got their own CEO. They got their own fundraising. It's just these days. The worst of the banks and multinationals, they tend to back the Democrats. If they're giving any money to Republicans, they're quietly giving it to never-Trumpers on the state level and keeping a little bit more hush-hush and using some middleman to do it, I'm sure. Oh, this company with 10 workers donated $10 million to my campaign. Wow, isn't that swell? Where did they get the money? Oh, they got $11 million. They got to pocket $1 million of it for themselves because they were getting it from some larger company that would have been capped off from doing that beforehand. Oh yeah, we're not partisan. We'll just form this little PAC group. It'll be just fine. We'll give it to the local DNC, and then, that'll give it in turn to the candidate. Woo, straw purchase. Wonderful. That's about all. Peace out.